Okay, this is the second tutorial. What we're going to do in this session is texture the front door here on this scene. It's going to be different to the one in the previous section because this isn't going to be a tile texture. This is going to be a UV map texture for the scene. So what I've done here to this model is detach the polygons I want to texture. So if I click on this door, you can just see I've got this door here. All I've done simply is I've applied a planar map to it. It's nothing complex, so if you look around the scene, it's just one sheet rather than the rest. If you wanted to do it differently, you could take the screws and bolts. If we have a look at this at bigger resolution, you could take the screws or bolts, take them onto different smaller maps, say 32 by 32 pixels. But at the moment, all it's gone onto is one UV map. You can capture this UV map quite differently in Macs. Up to version 7, there's a plugin called Textporter, which is you have to get, simply put it. Or with the 3D Max 8 now, you can it's inbuilt, so you don't have to worry about getting additional third-party plugins. So if you look, I've applied UV map modifier. Gone into the edit and you can see there's the UV map already. If I wanted to have done this again, I would simply apply this model to the mesh, selected the faces, applied a number of modifiers which are down here on Max 8, or if you use the other modifiers down here on previous versions, then you'll get the same effect. Once you've done this, you can go to Tools, then Render UVW Template. You can set what settings you want. Just to show you quickly, generally that's the kind of map that most people will work from, although for some reason Max defaults to green. Anyhow, once you've saved this image, then you can start working on the texture. So if I show you in Photoshop what I've done. Right, the two windows here, the one's the UV map on the left, and then on the right is what the final image looks like. If I just switch back to Max, close these down, show you what it looks like applied. So if I render that a second, there you got a quick shot of what the texture looks like applied to the surface when it's finished. Right, let's go back. The first thing I do once I've got this into Photoshop is just to set up my workflow. So I'll probably put the rulers on, then I'll set this UV map up. When you get it into Photoshop to start with, it will be on a background layer. What I normally do from there is I'll duplicate the layer, delete the original background because it's normally locked, and then I'll move it right up to the top of my layers, and I'll apply a screen blend onto it, and I'll probably adjust the opacity. So at the moment it's on 100%, just so you can see clearly what's going on. Basically, applying it to screen, as soon as I apply any other information underneath, it'll get rid of the black but still show the guidelines, which is really useful when you're trying to paint accurately. So what I started with is a simple metal texture, which I can switch on just as layer 1 here. If I turn the guides off to start with, there we go. You can see it's just basically plain monotone metal image there, well, concrete almost. So that's what I've started with, and from there I've built it up a number of layers, and I'm going to explain now. So what I've done to this layer to start with is I've saturated it and applied some variations. So if I click on another image here, is eventually that grey concrete texture will look something like this. Obviously yours will be a lot more accurate because you'll have a bit more time, but what I've done is I've selected this layer here, then I'll add some variations, red colours like that. I've also overlaid another kind of concrete texture, which is here, the metal colour overlay, and all that's done is just add in some more colour. So if I go back to this one again, you'll see here I've got several panels coming off. and they're all going at kind of diagonal lines. That's mainly because of the UV map. I'll turn this back on again. You can see where the panels separate along that line. Give me a second and I'll show you a bit better. So I'm just drawing on a couple of guides to make it a bit more obvious what I'm doing. So you can see this. I'm going to change it to bright green. There we go. Where you can see these separations is I've divided them up into different panels and then basically built them up. Now to do this, if we turn the guides off again, I'm going to say this panel here, all I've done is I'll go back to my concrete layer, I'll switch on my guides, then I've grabbed the lasso tool. You can use any one you want, because this is mainly square. I've just done it with the polygon one, so I'll grab out my shape and select it. There we go. Once you've got your shape selected, I'll copy that area and paste it. You can call it whatever you want, say panel 1. And the next thing I've done is I've applied blend options modifier and basically just given it some height, so we can say, there we go, tell it where the light's coming from. You can mess with all the depth settings and everything like that. So if I turn that off again, and that's kind of what I've done with the others. If you look on here, there's a lot more depth and detail on which all I've done is I've gone over with either the dodge and burn tool and simply added some more highlights or shadows depending on what I wanted. So depending where I want the light coming from in the texture, depends on where I can use these. If you can, try to paint in your highlights and shadows rather than using dodge and burn, because sometimes it can go a bit overboard, and if you can see some of the shadows in there are just not the right colours that you want to use. This is just a quick way of showing you how to do things. So all I've done, going back to this image, is I've done that several times. In this case, I've simply, because the texture is symmetrical, all I've done is I've made one side of these panels and then flip them over. So I'll just show you quickly with this one. You can simply duplicate the layer, then go to edit, transform and flip horizontal. If you press V or get the move tool, you can shift it right over. Obviously you might have to scale it a bit, and then you've got two sides of panels really quick and easy. So if I just delete these for you a second and go back on to the original layer. The next thing I've done is I started to build up some of the trims, which I can show you is here. These trims are done basically the same as the panels. What I've done is I've switched on the guides, grabbed the lasso, so I'll show you quickly, just something simple. I'll flip back to this original grey layer in a minute. It's not showing because there's stuff above it, but now it will. There we go. And I simply selected the shape I want out. So here we go, it's a quarter of this trim, and then I'll copy and paste it to blending options. I'll just use whatever default settings they give me this time. And if we turn off the guides, there you can see there's like a quick trim there. Now if you look on that right, they've got the yellow and black caution kind of guidelines going around the whole door, and also there's like rust and details on it, and all I've done there is use some overlays. So if we go out to trim here, next I'll grab probably grab some kind of metal texture. So if you bear with me a second, I will have a look, see what I can find. It's always good to get a big texture library when it comes to overlaying and use other textures for materials. So I've got simply selected a bit of metal from another texture, pasted it into the scene, and then messed with the blends options to get the kind of bumps or necessary reflections and stuff that I want with this piece of metal. So yeah, that's kind of what I've done. I've duplicated the material, obviously, to fill the whole trim. Then I've added the colour, which you can do a number of ways. All I've done is trying to select a kind of yellow that I've wanted. Ooh. And then I've got the lasso and simply marked off sections that I want. So put this on a new layer and fill in sections. So there you go. So it's not interfecting with anything below it. So I've got this yellow texture on above. And normally you can set it to overlay. As you can see, it's a similar sort of thing to what we're aiming below. So if I just call this yellow overlay for now, then the next thing I've done is made another new layer and gone and found a more darker yellow. I haven't made it 100% black. And then done the same, made a lasso, filled it in, and then looked for the kind of blend mode. Sometimes multiply is quite good. Depends how much of the metal beneath, and if you like overlay is fine again on there. So as you can imagine, repeat this around the texture and you get the same kind of effect as the finished one. So if I delete these for you, give me a second. Alright, so after the first few edits you will end up with something similar to this. You have a panel, you'll have the trim going round, and then simply you'll notice there's quite a lot of shadows around. What I've done is, once I've got the trim and the basic panel set up, I've got the burn tool and paintbrush and painted in some more shadows. So say underneath the trim you've got a nice crisp shadows. Just use it to your discretion and try to make it applicable to what you want to do. The rest of the texture really is building up on the simple things and giving it that bit more depth. So I can quickly show you these bolts and screws. If I flick them on, again, these bolts and screws, switch the guides on, see where they are. If you want to be completely accurate about it, you can see that these bolts here aren't precisely matching the UV map, but it's just quick. What I've done is I'll make a standard shape. So if I go switch these bolts and screws off a minute, I'll usually start with a simple grey colour, quite light, and change my selection, get elliptical, line it up roughly to the screw. So there we go, fill it. So if I add these in, then I'll change the blending options and I'll bevel emboss. Now this is completely up to you how you want your screws now, whether you want them to be sticking out from your surface, being embossed into them like this pillow emboss. I'll just show you that. I'll turn the guides off. There you go. Those are with the screws, just depending on what sort of fitting you want on it. Then the next I've done is turn the guides back on. I'll get a slightly darker colour. This is just to get the ridge in your screw, so we'll just call it ridge for now. And all I've done here is you can either use the paintbrush to do this or get the selection tool again. If you want to get a straight line with the paint brush, click, then hold shift and click again, and it will draw you a straight line. Turn those guides off. You can see the straight line there. What I'm about to do is to add another bevel emboss, so I'm just thickening this a bit so it picks it up. Then I'll go back into blending options, bevel and emboss, and there you go, there's inner bevel there. You can play with the settings to what kind of screw you want. You can change this to whatever you want. So depending on if you've got a flathead screwdriver or Phillips screwdriver, whatever you want, you can duplicate these ridges and rotate them with the transform tool, which is Control T. Then apply blending modifier. Even if you don't want to do that, you can paint the shadows in yourself with the burn tool if you prefer. And rather than messing around with Photoshop, you can just simply most of the Photoshop tools work the same way. So if you press Shift and click to do straight line with the paintbrush, it does it for the dodge and burn tools as well. So you can get away with the same thing. So quickly, that's just simple screw head. Once you've got the kind of form nailed down, then like the other layers, you can overlay some textures if you want, or add some filters in Photoshop to get a bit more depth or detail into your texture. So it's doing the same as the other one here. You can see the typical kind of layer and blend modes going on. So yeah, you get the idea. So that's basically how the screws have been made. So once you've done that, all I've done is like the other, I've duplicated them. So simply you'll have your original layer. I'll turn these off a minute. Then I've just gone to duplicate, moved them around. You can select, if you want to, you can select them, Control Paste. One thing that I've done on here, which is slightly different, is if you switch on the guides, you can see that the ridge that the screw is sitting on is different. So what I've had to do is I've duplicated the screws or bolts, moved them, and then positioned them again with the transform tool. So if I show you that quickly, I'll grab this screw here and I've moved it. As you can see, it doesn't align to the one to the left, so I'll press Control T, rotate it, press Enter. That's it really. Okay, so if I now turn that off a second. So that's how we get to this far, with basically manipulation of some layers, overlaying some textures, using the transform tool, the lassos, and dodge and burn. Next, I should turn on the windows. These are basically a combination of what you've seen in the rest of the texture, all in one. All I've done here, so I'll make a new layer. I can show you now. Windows, call it whatever you like. Is I'll just drawn a selection out. In this case, I've painted it quite a desaturated greeny colour. Depending on what you're using, or if it's for a game engine, film, or just a still image, you can change these to your will. At the moment, they haven't got any kind of shader or reflection properties, but you can do that with Max. You could probably use some sort of alpha channel, then give it, I don't know, a cube map or some ray tracer material if you want to, because at the moment it's quite flat. What I've done here, the next step is play with the blending modes again. Messed with the inner bevel. This time I'm giving it a bit more of a size. Then on other steps I've done is simply play with the dodge and burn again. Added a few cracks. So this is just up to your artistic inspiration. This bit is paint your cracks and adjust the highlights. Then I've added things like a bit of a metal bump, or get a glass texture. If you've got one, have a look on Google, find some royalty-free images, then those are done really. It's not difficult to do that bit. The final main piece of form in the texture you can see is the letters 13A. All I've done here is I've used the Photoshop text tool and then played with some of the blending options and filters. So to do this, all I've done is I've gone into the text tool. So You can type whatever you want here. So for the moment I'm going to say simply 3dpalace.com. You can make this typeface or font whatever you want. This is just a random one at the moment, so it's Tahoma bold. You can change the sizes, whatever. Right. Then the next thing I've done is I've rasterized this layer. Basically, what that means, once I've rasterized this text layer, is I can no longer affect it with the vector tools in the text typeface. Now, all I can do is it basically becomes an editable image like the other layers in this file. So now I can affect it with any of the filters, with the paint tools, and any other method in Photoshop. So for this, you can do all sorts with this now. You can give it a bit of faded look with a tiny bit of noise. I've done things like just simple wind blast effect on it. So if I now zoom in, after that wind blast, it's kind of faded this away. You can duplicate it on a number of layers and have different effects on each one if you want. So now it's got blasts on the left and the right. You can also adjust all kinds of things. What I've done eventually with this thing is to grab the eraser tool, because this gives me complete control now. I can say exactly whereabout on this bit of text that I want this where. And you can adjust the opacity of the brush. So either I can get it on 100 and go oof, and rub lots of it out, or on a slight opacity and just give it gentle wear in certain parts. So now you can see the E of Palace is going in the com here. This is just simple stuff. You can add all sorts to this. You can change the colours if you want to, so we can colorise it and add different saturation and lightnesses to it eventually, depending on what kind of setup you want on this font. So that's the last major bit. So from here on afterwards, if you look at the differences at the moment, is that one, the texture on the right, the final image does look a lot more dirty. It's quite a big thing in games, is to check up on your references. What do you want the environment to look like? So if we look at the moment, it's a sci-fi environment. We want a bit of wear and tear in there. We want a bit of corrosion on the metal and a bit of weathering. So all I've done now is added a lot of overlays to alter the colours and add some weathering in there. So if I switch on some of these layers now, what I've got here is what I've called grime, which is the kind of the green, orangey, rusty colour. Now, to do this, you can either sample some rust from another texture. So if I bring up that metal texture again, I can clone bits of this by select my clone tool. I can alt-click a layer, go back into here, paint it on this, and then use a blending mode to add it to the image. Or what I've done in this case is I wanted to control it myself. So I've gone to the brush, select kind of a speckly brush. You can make your own brushes as well. It's quite simple to do that. So I'll select the brush, and I've gone looking for a kind of a green. Then I've given it a low opacity. So if I turn the original grime off, right, and then I've adjusted the opacity, and I'll simply start painting where I want some of this wear. So as you can see, it's appearing a bit in the bottom right. If you want it to behave differently, you can adjust, say if I put it on hard light, turn the opacity up a bit, you can tell basically how you want this layer to behave. So now you can go through the blend modes. You can see just exactly how this green or corruption kind of rust might affect on the image. Okay, so that's just one simple. Right, the next thing I've tried to make is make the door a bit more distinguished from the rest of the metal. So if you look here, it's a bit more of a yellow. So all I've simply been doing is making a new layer and then painting in a hard light in yellow. So if you can look on the settings on this section, all I've done is got hard light, opacity, So to do that, I've just sectioned off the door with the lasso tool, so do that quickly. There we go. And then I've got a yellow texture from the palette. And you can either do this another way, a number of ways. If you want the whole of the door to completely stand out a different colour, you can, there we go, you can fill it in. Or if you just want sections, you can get that speckle brush back that we used to paint the green and just add a kind of yellow bump, right? And then apply it to hard light, and then I've changed the opacity down a lot, so as you can see now it stands out a lot more compared to the rest of the texture. So if I get rid of that a minute, right, and then the rest of this texture really is just adding the same kind of effects to the rest of the image with kind of, if I turn this layer on here, dirt dripping, you can see kind of corroded material has gone down from the ridge all over the text. It's a similar kind of effect, just changing from hard light to multiply with the same kind of green colour. And then that's that for that texture. What I've done then is flatten the image. I click on flatten. There we go. And then I've sized it down. Say if my texture budget for that particular image is 256, then I've applied a sharpen filter. You can control this at whatever you want. You can have different types of sharpen now in the new Photoshop, so it's got a bit more of a control whether you want it really harsh or you don't want a lot, or it's up to you. So then I've ended up with this type of image. I've saved it out and then applied it as material in Max. So if we go back and have a look here, you could take this further, like I said before, with reflection materials, some bump maps, normal maps, but yeah, that's basically it for this tutorial. So I ended up with a kind of a blast door texture there, and later on I'll be showing you some more information on how to make the console here on the left to the door. Thank you.